This is the time when people are asking you all of these questions and expecting you to have an answer or to have already ticked off these boxes or have a plan for when you're ticking off all these boxes. And that's what creates the stress and the pressure and the fear. Welcome to Ebbs and Flows with Erin. In this show, we're getting real about navigating the ups and downs of life together. I'm your host, Erin, and we're ditching the pressure to have it all figured out along the way because honestly, nobody does. We'll explore all things healing, growing, creating, and connecting. And if you deal with anxiety, depression, being a highly sensitive person, or just feeling overwhelmed by life sometimes, I see you, and this show is for you. My intention with these conversations is simple: to leave you feeling empowered, validated, and most importantly, reminded that you are never alone, no matter where you're at on your own journey. Learning that we all have the power to heal genuinely changed my life. And the best part, healing does not have to be complicated. The smallest changes really can make the biggest impact, and it can be joyful, fulfilling, and something that we do together. So join me in getting real about what it means to heal. Thank you for being here, and now let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to Ebbs and Flows with Erin, or welcome back to Ebbs and Flows with Erin. I'm your host, Erin, and today I'm so grateful to have you here, whether you are listening or watching. We are going to be talking about the topic of aging, specifically turning 30 years old, because I am turning 30 2 days from when this episode drops. February 28th is my birthday, and I have felt called to talk about the topic of aging, the expectations and pressures, fears, and freedom that come with it. Especially because since last year when I turned 29, I made a post on Ebbs and Flows Instagram actually on my 29th birthday about this topic of the comments you receive when people find out that you're approaching 30. They fall, in my experience, under two umbrellas. The one being fear-based, getting old sucks, and the second being gratitude, joy, excitement. People either telling you 30s were the best time of your life or that 30s is when your life really begins. So naturally, approaching 30, I found that so many conversations surround the same topics. Things like buying homes, getting married, having children, your career. And this is what makes people feel pressure to have their whole life figured out at 30 years old. And this is why it can feel scary and stressful to turn 30, because there's so much pressure to have it all figured out. But the reality is, I don't think anyone has it figured out, and even when you think you have it figured out, life typically does not unfold that way. John Lennon, one of my favorites, said that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I really believe that, and in a lot of the conversations I've had with people who are past 30, they say the same thing. Like, maybe you think you have it all figured out at 30, and then you approach 40, and you're laughing at your 30-year-old self thinking you had it figured out. So, my intention with this episode is to normalize and reframe the experience of aging in general, but especially at this milestone of 30 years old. Because I personally have been telling people in these conversations that I am thrilled to be turning 30 and entering my 30s era. I feel very grateful and privileged to get older. If you're not getting older, then you're not living life, which means you're not on this planet Earth, which I'm grateful to be living this life. So that's how I feel about it. And I've had differing reactions to that. I even had one person say to me, like, "Oh God, you must be the only woman I've ever heard say that," which I don't really accept that response. I feel like either those women were not yet 30, any of them, or it was because of what society has put pressure on them to have figured out that they were afraid of turning 30. And I do have to give credit to my mom. She always told me that 30s were the best years of her life. So I've always had that in my head that my 30s were going to be a good time in my life. And just how my life has went thus far, how my 20s went, I have struggled and gone through so much already that I feel like I don't fear my 30s because I have a lot of evidence of what I have been through, experienced, and where I'm at now. So I have evidence that I'm able to heal from and handle hard times. So I want to start off with reflecting on my 20s and reasons that I am happy to leave my 20s behind with love, but happily. And as I just said, I did struggle a lot throughout my 20s, and in general, 20s are messy, they're confusing, you don't really have much stability in any area, you're feeling pressure to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life, and then taking that path and being stressed out trying to make that happen. And in all ways, you just don't really have any stability. You're trying to figure out who you are as a person, what you want from life, what you value, while taking in all of the external opinions, validation, getting stuck in comparison. You're gaining people in life, you're losing people in life. Things that maybe wouldn't affect you very much now approaching 30 affected you and made your world feel like it was ending in your 20s. There was drama and things that affected your mental, emotional state that you look back now and they wouldn't have that effect now. It's just a very tumultuous time, if you ask me. And yes, it is a time of being fun, wild, and free, and reckless. I experienced a lot of love, a lot of blessings, a lot of adventures. There was a lot of positives in my life throughout my 20s. But I want to acknowledge that I definitely don't believe that that's the best time of my life. As someone who on this podcast, I've shared a lot about my mental struggles throughout my 20s with anxiety and depression and grief. I've shared about my full physiological breakdown that made me make the choice to change my life and go on my holistic healing journey. That happened around my 26th birthday, my full physiological breakdown. So anxiety and depression were very prevalent in my 20s. As beautiful and fun and blessed as they were, there was a lot of mental, emotional struggles. And a comment that I received a lot in the last few years, where I'm naturally in an era where a lot of people I know are getting married and having babies. I'm attending a lot of weddings the last few years. And I've had a couple people say things like, well, at least it's not funerals yet, or just wait till it's funerals. And I often think to myself, like, if only you knew. Because personally for me, I experienced a lot of loss throughout my 20s. There was a span of 10 years where I lost 9 people in my life, and most of that happened in my 20s. So I experienced a lot of death, and I associate a lot of death with my 20s. So I share that just to say that it's not natural for people to assume that you've experienced a lot of death and loss in your 20s, but it just goes to show that not everyone's experience is the same, and life doesn't always happen on the timeline that we have in our heads that it's supposed to happen. And that is partially why I look so forward to my 30s, because I have had that era of a lot of death and loss and grief. And grief will always be with me. Grief is always with you. That is what I've learned about grief. You never are done grieving. Your relationship with it just ebbs and flows, and it's always with you. The biggest lesson I've learned about grief is that grief and joy can coexist. You can be joyful, you can be grateful for your life and building your life, growing, but you can also be grieving. And grief often comes in waves and shows up the most intensely when you're experiencing really happy, joyous moments in your life. And that can be really confusing. But grief is always with you. So it's not that I feel like entering my 30s, I won't be grieving, because I know I always will. But the amount of death that has occurred in my life, I associate with my 20s. So things are not always the way that we assume they are. And I'm really grateful that I am approaching 30 right now, and I have been able to reflect. I feel like birthdays are a great time to reflect on your past year, or I'm turning 30, so I've been reflecting on my whole past decade of my 20s, and it is empowering to reflect on where I once was and the struggles that I was dealing with mentally and emotionally throughout my 20s, and to see where I've brought myself to now. And this is the main message that I want to spread with ebbs and flows in general, is that you have so much more power to heal and change your state of wellness of your life, mentally, physically, emotionally, you have so much more power in yourself to heal than you even know. And I'm just reminded of that when I'm reflecting on my 20s and the places where I once was struggling so badly mentally, and seeing where I'm at now, where I have so many more tools to support myself and be able to take on life's ups and downs without being completely throttled by them at any given time, especially as a highly sensitive person, struggling with anxiety and depression. And so I wanted to share a journal entry that I came across while I've been reflecting on my 20s recently. And this feels definitely uncomfortable to share, but when I read it, I believe it drives home the message that you are able to heal and get through things and bring yourself into a better place mentally, especially. And so this entry is from 2020. It's actually February 20th, 2020, so a week or so before my 25th birthday. And my full physiological breakdown happened around my 26th birthday. So this journal entry is exactly 1 year before I had my full breakdown. So, February 20th, 2020, I wrote, "Today I can't kick this depression. I am trying. I know I am strong enough, but I am exhausted. I am trying so hard to pave and stay firm in my path. Days like today, I feel empty, lost, and alone, unseen. I am going to continue on unbothered by the fact that I feel alone in my head. My higher self will guide me through. It is just painful and exhausting, but I can do it." So, that feels kind of funny to share. I've never publicly shared a journal entry of mine, but I also want to point out that I had wonderful, supportive people in my life at this time and throughout the times of some of my darkest, deepest struggles. It was that I did not open up or let anyone know about the struggles that I was dealing with. So when I would say that I felt lost, alone, unseen, you can feel that way while being surrounded by supportive, loving people, because we don't always let people in to support us in the ways that we need. So that's another reason for sharing this, because I want to normalize and send the message that you're never alone in how you're thinking or feeling, and you have the power and the ability within yourself to heal, grow, and overcome your challenges and your struggles. And that was me approaching 25, and I'm now approaching 30, feeling better than I've ever felt. So yeah, this is another reason why I am thrilled to be entering my 30s era. And it's not about reaching perfection or feeling like I have it all figured out. I know that the next decade, the next rest of my life, will come with more lessons, more ups, more downs. But again, I'm grateful that I'm at the point where I've been able to learn and implement tools and work on my relationship with myself so that I'm entering my 30s feeling more grounded, more aware of who I am and what I value and what matters to me, and having boundaries, knowing what I will and will not accept for myself and from myself in life, feeling safe to be seen and heard as my authentic self and share things to create true connection in my life and support others while I support myself. And I feel like all of these things I just listed only grow more and more throughout your 30s. In the conversations I've had, that is what I find most people who are in their 30s or are past their 30s say, that you're more aware of who you are and what you want from your life in terms of values. You have more of a solid group of people and friends in your life. You feel more safe to be seen as your true self. You don't care as much about external validation or keeping up with what everyone else is doing. And you have more stability in terms of hopefully mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. Because naturally in your 20s, you're starting from ground zero. I mean, unless you have some sort of financial support, which all the power to you if you do. But for most people, when you're approaching and you're going through your 30s, this is when your financial state is becoming more stable and you have more ability to do the things that you want to do in life, to be able to buy things or invest in things or travel, do the things you want to do. I always tell my friends, I feel like we are only going to have more fun and better times as life goes on, because we're only going to have more stability and more of a capacity to do the things that we really truly want to do and to delight in life and luxuriate in life. And I don't know if this is because I watch a lot of Real Housewives, but these women inspire me in this way because they are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they are still having a blast on their girls' trips, their couples' trips. They have dinner parties, they have parties with their friends, and they only get better and better and better because they have more capacity to do that. So I am believing for myself and for all of us that that is a fact, that you just have more fun as life goes on. And I feel like the reason that turning 30 specifically comes with so much pressure or stress or feelings of fear is because this milestone specifically is attached to things like marriage, babies, owning homes, having your career figured out, pretty much having your entire life figured out. This is the time when people are asking you all of these questions and expecting you to have an answer or to have already ticked off these boxes or have a plan for when you're ticking off all these boxes. And that's what creates the stress and the pressure and the fear. And the fact is that you do not have to have your whole life figured out at 30 years old. If you talk to anyone who's past 30, they will tell you that you can be at 30 and think you have your plan or you have it all figured out, and then you reach 40 or 50 and you're looking back laughing at yourself because you didn't. Or life didn't go the way that you had planned, or that you had so much more to learn. And especially as women, when it comes to children, I have never been asked so much by not only people close to me, which that's fine, but people that like I barely even know. They'll find out I'm approaching 30 and they're asking me about children and when I'm going to have kids and marriage and all these things and your biological clock. And yes, the health of a woman, and as you get older, it is affected, but I choose to believe and come from the thought process that we are really privileged and blessed to have so much access and options when it comes to our health in general, and then having or creating a family. And I really, really, truly believe, this may sound naive of me, but this is what makes me feel like I don't have anything to be stressed about turning 30. What's meant to be will always be. You can have a plan or make a plan, and life won't go that way. Or maybe it will. You don't have to have it all figured out, and what you think you want now could change, and it's allowed to change. You're allowed to change your mind, and things are allowed to go differently than you thought that they were going to go. I personally don't feel passionately or called to have children or be a mother. I never have. My entire life, I've never dreamt of being a mom or had that maternal pull to have children. And I've never dreamt of a wedding or marriage. I was never the young girl dreaming of my wedding or my wedding dress or wanting to be married. Those are things that I've never felt called to or felt passionately about, and I feel passionately about a lot in life, and those have just never been one of those things. But I feel okay about that because I also remind myself that that could change, and one day maybe I will feel called to have children, or I will feel called to want to get married, and I'm in a long-term relationship, so people sometimes don't know what to do with my answers when I say, like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't have a plan, but I'm open to whatever may happen in the future. I actually brought this up in therapy once because I found that, again, naturally, these conversations come up so much, and I would start to over-explain myself, and then by the end of me over-explaining myself to someone who just asked me this question, I get to the end and I'm like, I don't even know if what I just told you is even my truth or exactly what I think or feel right now, because I feel like I have to explain myself, and now I'm just rambling and I don't even know what I just said. When my true answer is, I don't know. I don't have a plan right now, and I don't feel called to it right now, but that could change. And I said that to my therapist, and I was like, is something wrong where I don't have a plan in mind or like really strong feelings in mind. And she brought up a really good point that women have always felt this way. There has always been women who didn't necessarily want to get married or have children, but it hasn't been safe to voice those feelings or even talk about this openly until very recently, honestly. So now that we're more able to be open about our true feelings, if you are someone who doesn't necessarily feel called to follow the timeline that is set out for us as women, we're safe to talk about that now, and it feels like it's wrong, but there has always been women since ancient times who have felt that way, but it wasn't safe to express that or to follow their instincts because that is what they had to do. They had to get married, have a family, and then take care of that family, and that's just how it was. So I do feel very grateful and blessed to live in a time where I'm even safe to voice these feelings and to make this choice for myself. And something else that's been eye-opening to me and I think is important to recognize, especially as we approach this time of life where people expect you to have a plan. First of all, take the pressure off. You don't. There is still so much life left to live. You don't have to have everything figured out at this time. But also, you will always mourn the life that you don't choose because you could be happy and fulfilled in many different lives. It's all about the one that you choose for yourself and then intentionally watering that life and fostering it to be a healthy, fulfilling life. But there are many choices you could make and paths that you can choose to go in life, and I truly believe that you can be happy and fulfilled in many different lives that you could choose for yourself. There's not this one fairy tale route that is your only option to be healthy and fulfilled. And with every choice you make for yourself, there is mourning of the choice that you didn't make and the life that you could have lived that you chose to not live. So, for example, if you choose to get married, you will mourn a life that you may have lived if you didn't get married. If you choose to have children, you will mourn a life that you could have lived if you didn't have children. If you choose to not have children, you will mourn a life that you could have lived if you chose to have children. If you choose to live in this one place, you can mourn a life that you would have lived if you chose to live in a different place, etc., etc. So that can be helpful with taking the pressure off of the choices you're making for your life, because it reminds you that there's often never a perfect choice. And the right choice to make is what feels right to you. And that you are allowed to change your mind down the road. And there's no deadline for figuring life out. We are always figuring life out. I don't know if we ever reach a point where we have it figured out. So the key is identifying a life that feels good to you and taking action that aligns with that life, and knowing that it's okay if that does change along the way. Everyone's path looks differently, and it can be really hard to remember that, especially with things like social media, where naturally you are comparing when you're scrolling on your feed and seeing people's highlight reels of life. But it is a fact that what works for someone else might not be what works for you. What fulfills someone else might not be what fulfills you. And that's okay. And what you think you want in your life at 20, 30, 40, 50 could all look differently. And that's okay too. But in my opinion, as someone who once did spiral about, worry about, stress about, ruminate about so many things, it is not worth it. Because what's meant to be is always going to be, and there's no black and white. There's a lot of gray in life that we don't talk about enough. But it's okay to not have it all figured out at any given point in life. And I look forward to learning more throughout my 30s and seeing where life takes me. And I'm grateful to have you guys along the way as well. And I would love to hear about any of your experiences either in your 30s or approaching your 30s, or how you feel about aging or your birthday. Birthdays people feel so polarizing about as well, because I mean it's tied to how you feel about aging. Some people hate them, refuse to acknowledge them, and some people love them and celebrate them for a month. So the topic of aging is really just fascinating, and I can empathize with and understand being on either end of the spectrum. But I encourage you to embrace life and feel the privilege that is getting older and being able to live life on this earth because we're not here for that long, and you never know how long you are going to be here. And really, the next decade, or any given decade or year, day of your life even, is determined by how you make it and how you choose to see it and experience it. As someone with chronic nostalgia, I would always call it, it was helpful for me to learn from my therapist that every time we reflect on a memory, it is shifting and changing a little bit each time. So then the way we remember the memory is not exactly how the memory happened. And that's where nostalgia can come in, where we look back on certain things and have such nostalgic memories where we are so deeply yearning to have that time back. And my therapist pointed out it often wasn't exactly how we're remembering it. And if we were remembering it exactly how it was, we would see that maybe we don't need to go back to that time. And we can embrace making new memories as we move on and get older. Because I used to look back at being younger and I would feel sick to my stomach with nostalgia, wishing so badly that I could go back to childhood or specific times in life. So learning that the way that we remember things is not necessarily how they actually were, not in a dark way to make it sad or make those memories not mean what they mean, but it is encouraging to not ruminate in nostalgia for too long and forget about making the best of the life that we are living now and moving forward. So I hope that something today could resonate with you. And my main intention, again, is to remind you that you're never alone, no matter what you're thinking or experiencing. You are definitely not behind in life, no matter where you're at on your own journey. I encourage you to embrace your own journey and take it as your own. Try not to compare to others, and trust the timing of your life. And remember that you're allowed to change your mind at any given time. Take the pressure off of having things figured out, because the truth is, no one really ever does. What was this one post recently from Words with Vibrations? I love him, and he has the book The Art of You. And he recently shared a post of 3 truths that are life-changing. Wait, let me find it because it's really good. Okay, I found it. Things to remember. 1, you are a soul wearing a human disguise. 2, nobody knows what's going on. 3, everything is a miracle. And I shared it to EBBS and Flow's story, and I said, genuinely life-changing realizations. And they are. So I will leave you on that note. Again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate every one of you who listens or watches. I hope that you could take something away from today's episode, and I look forward to continuing these conversations with you. I'm sending a lot of love and gratitude. I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.